Hey guys, Godfather of Anxiety here. I just wanted to make a short video about some of my biggest struggles that I've battled and had over the last almost 22 years now, dealing with anxiety disorder, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. This isn't a poor me video. I'm not letting you guys know about these struggles, to feel sorry for me or, to try to act as though I'm unique in some way. I understand that there's a lot of people out there who experience these same things. And, my purpose is to show you guys how low things can get and how you can come back and overcome them. Because, there's things that I can do now that I never thought I'd be able to do again. And, it's still always going to be a work in progress. It's not, I wish it was just easy and I didn't have to manage it. But so that's my purpose in letting you guys know about some of the biggest struggles I've had. It's to give you guys hope. If you're in that place, hopefully some of these things that I'll tell you about will give you some hope. So one of the first things that was one of the biggest struggles I had, and I've alluded to it in many videos, I've even shown pictures in some of my shorts about putting on weight. And putting on weight, in a perfect world, we wouldn't judge people or treat people a certain way according to their outward appearance, but we don't live in a perfect world. And the fact that I had gotten so heavy, I put on about 125 pounds. I mean, health was an issue. And, like it or not, people draw a lot of conclusions about people according to their outward appearance, and specifically when it comes to weight. They're going to assume you're lazy. There's a list of things that people will assume about you when you're heavy. And to compound the situation with me getting heavier, because, the reason why I got heavier, I'm having racing thoughts, I'm having panic attacks, every day I'm having at least one panic attack. And so I'm trying to, self-soothe, self-medicate with food, which is foolish. But it goes back to something, from my childhood, when I went through a very traumatic experience as a child and losing a younger sibling. I made an inappropriate connection, emotional connection with food back then. And yes, I was that chubby adolescent who got teased. That was me. And I had, through becoming extremely physically active, I had kind of put that behind me. Listen, I'm not saying that I was, going to be modeling swimsuits, but I had gotten, maintained fairly decent shape for quite a while. And then when I got hit with the panic attacks, the anxiety disorder, I remember 1 week I put on 17 pounds. And it was bad. And, just like I said, not feeling, any of you who battled your weight know what I'm talking about. And, growing out of clothes, walking around, again, I say this all the time, but I have a beautiful family. And, I felt bad walking around with my wife when I was just gigantic. And again, in a perfect world, people, would look at somebody who's, maybe unhealthy with how heavy they are, look at them with compassion and wonder, if there's something they could do to help. But that's not the world we live in. The world we live in is there's a lot of judgments being made about people and conclusions being drawn, even without knowing exactly, why we're looking at what we're looking at. So that was one of the big things. And it affected me because it it brought back some things that I dealt with as a child and as a, when I was going through puberty. And it was very difficult to navigate this. And it actually compounded and fed into the anxiety as well as the depression. I was severely clinically depressed, especially about a year and a half into, these conditions. I had become very clinically depressed, probably around '05, very clinically depressed. The next struggle that I'm going to mention to you guys is, and I talk about this all the time too, but essentially losing my ability to drive a vehicle. Now, I would hold my breath and force myself to drive to work and back. And that was literally it. I mean, if I had to drive a mile down the road, it was death-defying for me. In fact, I had my first panic attack while I was driving, and for the first few weeks, even when I got in the car, I would start to have a panic attack again. It was really bad. So, this sounds bad, right? Somehow I managed to keep going to work, even though sometimes I had to pull off. It was terrible. But, we'd been married, my wife and I had been married for about 7 years when I started having these issues. And I was the guy who drove most of the time. I felt like with everything else that she does, that was the least I could do, especially when we went on trips and went places further away. And I lost that ability. And it sounds like a small thing, but it was very demasculinizing. And, it really affects your perception of your identity. And that's why I mentioned it as one of my biggest struggles. That, and obviously how it affects your ability to navigate through life. You want to be able to just pick up and go places in order to accomplish things, to buy things for the house, to all of those things. And this interfered with everything. And again, it really had an effect on my identity and made me feel very weak and, unmasculine. So anyways, that's another huge struggle I faced. Another, probably one of the absolute biggest struggles that I faced is just the way that these various anxiety spectrum disorders affected the relationships with the people I love the most, in particular, my wife and my children. Through a combination of having racing thoughts and, intrusive thoughts and panic attacks, you're not really in a situation to be able to even feel like you can hold a conversation with somebody. And if those of you out there who have racing thoughts, who have panic attacks, who have intrusive thoughts, all those different things, what that's like, trying to get through those conversations. Husbands and wives have them all the time. They're the conversations you have after the kids go to bed, where you're talking about the family, you're talking about each other, you're catching up on things, because in today's society we're always working. Those conversations that I so look forward to, right? Those, I dreaded them because I knew that I didn't have the mental energy to give to them. And it's tough to explain this to your wife, who for 7 years, you've been the person who talks the most. We kind of have a little bit of a different relationship in that way. I'm the talker. She's a little more reserved and laid back. And that works out really well. We complement each other really well. But, once I started having these issues with anxiety, that just wasn't the case anymore. And there'd be a lot of quiet when there should have been talking and communication. And these anxiety spectrum conditions are very hard for people who aren't affected by them to understand. Again, because they can't see what's wrong. There's not a diagnostic medical test that shows on a scan, oh, look, that's what's going on. So, it can really seem, especially at first, until they get a better understanding of what these conditions are like, it can seem like, this is a ruse. Like you're just putting this on because, I don't know, you just don't feel like investing anything in life anymore, or in relationships or anything. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? Those of us with these conditions care really deeply about things. We care about other people deeply. We care about the bigger picture, the really important things. We care about these things really deeply. But when you are in that state, it becomes this thing where you're just so focused on what's wrong and what's not feeling right that it has a tremendously negative effect on your relationships. And that struggle and building those relationships back up after I got treatment, but that was one of the biggest struggles I've had in battling anxiety, was the effect that it had on my relationships. Another thing, the effect it's had on my finances over the years, especially those first 6 years when, for 3 years, I was going and having scan after scan, test after test. I got tested head to toe, anything the insurance would cover. And actually, the first year, I didn't have insurance. So you guys can imagine the bills that were rung up then. And so for 3 years, I'm trying to figure out, because again, I was just so skeptical that these physical symptoms could be caused by anxiety. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me. And, finally you do come to grips with it once they've checked everything. They've done CAT scans and, there's no brain tumor. There's no, you don't even have an ulcer. You get checked for the zillionth time on, all these different conditions that you're so worried about having, and you just don't have them. And it's hard to believe, with the way you feel, that this is not being caused, this does not have a physiological cause. And it kind of does have a physiological cause, but the physiology is in the gray matter, right? And, or at least how those neurotransmitters are being interpreted by the brain. So anyways, so that had a devastating effect on our finances. And my wife was really the backbone of the family in navigating us through those tough times. So that was another thing that happened. And then, really my actual low point, and I think this kind of happens with a lot of us who have overcome anxiety spectrum conditions and gotten better and recovered. I did have a low point, and I had already tried getting treatment a couple times. I had, had every physiological test done that I could afford to have done. My family was in shambles just because I wasn't able to be a husband or a father in any meaningful way. And then I started having, I was deeply clinically depressed already. And then I started having derealization and depersonalization. And it kind of basically, the way I can put this for you guys is, I felt like The Walking Dead. I felt like I was a zombie, like I was just going through the motions. Nothing seemed real. It didn't even seem like the life that I had before. It was really strange. We always hear the word surreal, and people usually that's like, oh, it was like a dream, and they mean that in a positive way, right? But this was surreal in a very negative way. Just picture living in a nightmare. That's what it was like. Every day, you wake up, you're hoping you actually wake up from the nightmare, but you don't, and nothing feels real. I mean, it was to the point where I was, you know, I literally felt like I was on the verge of having a psychotic break. So at that time, I just said, well, I gotta try. I have to try something again, because otherwise I'm gonna, I'm gonna snap. I'm gonna break, and I'm gonna be broken in a way that's not gonna be able to be fixed. So I went to my primary. I was just a shell of myself. I remember I was just slumped over, and he said to me, I can give you a number of somebody, and you can give it another shot. And, I said, why not? I will. I'll try one more time. The first experience I had with a psychiatrist was horrific. The guy didn't care about what he was doing. He did not invest anything into it, and he basically used me as a guinea pig with various medications. And that is not what you want when you see a mental health professional. So this time was completely different. And the biggest difference I noticed right away with the gentleman that I saw was that he listened and that he cared. He didn't entertain the nonsense. He didn't we didn't have some big long discussion about possible illnesses or, things like that. He ignored what he needed to ignore because he knew what was wrong. And, all of the therapy that I did and the advice that he gave was right to the point and spot on. And that combined with, again, I've told you guys before, but he put me on an SSRI that I still take to this day, and slow-acting benzodiazepine that helped with the panic attacks that I still had at that point. And it was about 3 or 4 weeks in, and I started to feel significantly better. And then by 6 weeks, I thought, okay, I've got a shot at actually, having a life again. And, that was, I'll always be grateful to that gentleman, because he was very good at his job, and he actually cared about what he was doing. And that's what you need, right? I mean, it feels like a bad dream. When you have these anxiety spectrum conditions, it feels like a bad dream. And you just want to encounter, when you're getting treated, you want somebody who cares and somebody who listens. That way, they aren't just going to go by something they read out of a book, but they're going to treat you. They're going to treat the patient. And so I was very fortunate, and that started me on the road to recovery. I lost about 100 pounds in the first year and a half I saw him. My wife and I had our third child, so we were able to move on as a family. I was able to be a husband again, be a father again. And it hasn't been it wasn't linear, it wasn't smooth. I've had setbacks, I still have bad days, but overall, I recovered from a very dark place. A place where I was a zombie, a 365-pound zombie who was not a good husband or a good father. And I recovered to be able to support my family, to be a good husband, a good father, or that's probably a matter of debate. You'd have to ask them. But no, seriously, to be able to be, at least be the person that I know that I can be. And so the purpose in relaying this to you guys is just, guys, you can do it, no matter how dark of a place you're in right now, you can get up. No matter how far you've fallen, you can get up. Don't ever let anyone tell you you can't. You can. I promise you can. There have been people that have been in an even worse place than I was in, and they've climbed back out of it. And it basically you need to unlearn some of the horribly negative thought patterns that you develop when you have these conditions. And it's only human that you develop these thought patterns, because every day is horrible and things do always seem to get worse when we have these conditions. But once you start to recover, once you get treatment, once you start to recover, you have to unlearn the catastrophizing, unlearn the what if thinking, and not always assume that every ache or pain is a terminal illness, and every phone call is a loved one dying. And I could go on and on with the things that, our minds the tricks our minds can play on us. And we actually learn these thought patterns. They have to be unlearned. But once you get treatment and you start to unlearn them, guys, the sky's the limit. You can do anything that you put your mind to at that point. And, that's the whole reason I started the channel, because I felt like a lot of people, especially men, but women too, are scared to talk about mental health. They're scared to go see a mental health professional. Their lives are being ruined by these things. Maybe they're self-medicating with food, or they're self-medicating with alcohol or drugs. And their lives are in shambles because they don't have the courage to talk to a doctor or even a friend about some of the mental health issues they're experiencing. And I don't think that's productive for anybody. I think that if you have an issue, if you break a leg, you don't just tough it out and walk with a limp for the rest of your life. That's stupid. And it's also stupid not to get treatment for a mental health issue that is impacting your life, that it's ruining your relationships, that's making you into a selfish person when you're not a selfish person. So, basically, this is a video I made to give you guys hope. If you're down right now, get up. You can do it. The first step will be getting treatment, and that'll start you on your road. In the road, again, the road isn't just going to be straight up. There's not a magic pill. It's going to take work, but anything good in this life takes work, right? And after you accomplish it, you'll have that sense of satisfaction, but more importantly, you're going to have your identity back. You're going to have your life back. So that's about all I wanted to say in this video. Just wanted to go over some of the things that were really low points for me, and things that were really the worst parts of my conditions over the years, not being necessarily symptom specific like I tend to be in a lot of the videos. But anyways, thank you guys so much for all the engagement. I so greatly appreciate it. Until my next video, guys, take care.